In this video, we're going to talk about science and the three levels of understanding that come from different scientific investigations. Broadly speaking, science refers to a systematic approach for seeking and organizing knowledge about the natural world. In applied behavior analysis, our science is specifically interested in understanding socially significant behaviors that are meaningful to human beings. There are three levels of understanding that come from scientific investigations. These are description, prediction, and control. Descriptive studies help us to suggest a hypothesis or research questions for additional inquiry. In descriptive studies, scientists systematically observe a particular phenomenon and accurately describe their observations. These data then become known as a collection of facts about an observed event that can be quantified, classified, or examined for possible relationships known to exist. Oftentimes, descriptive studies play a role when we're interested in evaluating a new phenomena. Prediction is the second level of understanding that comes from scientific inquiry. This level of scientific understanding is when repeated observations show that two variables covary with each other. In other words, after we observe something time and time again, we know that when one thing occurs, we can predict that something else is likely to occur. So, for example, when it gets cold, the birds fly south. In the Midwest, trees fall off the leaves in the fall. One of my favorites is when I wear high heels, I'm cranky. Every time I ask my client to brush his teeth, he tries to bite me. This systematic covariation is known as a correlation. It's a relationship between two different variables. It can help us to predict whether one event will occur in the presence of another event, but it's really important to keep in mind that correlation does not imply causation. This means just because one thing happened, it doesn't necessarily cause another thing to happen. Because we didn't manipulate or control the variables, we can't say whether either of the observed variables are responsible for the change. So, for example, when I wear high heels, I'm cranky. There are several other reasons that might make me cranky when I'm wearing high heels. Chances are, if I'm wearing high heels, I'm going to a fancy, stuffy event where my Crocs weren't permitted. And so some of those other variables might be influencing my crankiness. Results of correlational studies, though, can really help us to guide additional research. In ABA, one of the most commonly used correlational designs is evaluating conditional probabilities. So, for example, I can calculate the probability that a behavior is likely to occur in the presence of another variable, or that a particular consequence is likely to happen following a behavior. So, for example, I might find that student disruptive behavior in a classroom is often followed by teacher attention, and I can calculate the specific probability that if a student is disruptive, they're going to obtain teacher attention. And conditional probabilities are important because it will help us to identify the antecedents that are most likely to occur before a behavior and the consequences that are most likely to occur following a behavior so that we can shape our intervention plan. The highest level of scientific understanding and the most useful to science is the concept of control. So, control allows us to determine functional relationships. So, a well controlled experiment that shows change in the dependent variable that's reliably produced by manipulation of the independent variable and considers confounding variables, which are extraneous variables. So, for example, in my high heel example, maybe it's just that I'm at a fancy event and I don't like wearing a dress, or I'd rather wear my Crocs, or I'd rather be crocheting. Maybe there are other extraneous variables influencing that. But when we can control for those other variables, we can say with more certainty that there's a causal relationship. And so the gold standard of experimental design is having control.